America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. I come to you live every Friday. Today I'm coming to you Monday morning just to talk a little bit about Afghanistan, and it just imploded officially, and so now we can talk about it. Although Richard Dean Winfield wrote a pretty good book about this in 2007, based on a paper he wrote in 2004, Modernity, Religion, and the War on Terror. And it pretty much just anticipates why these nation-building efforts fall down. And the crux of the argument is that nations need to be upheld by social factors. And if they're not upheld by social institutions, they implode, right? And they need to be upheld by particular social institutions that need to be formed in particular ways. And we're going to get into the particularities of this presently. Thank you for your time. And we failed in similar ways in the American South, which is why I think functionally you have an internal colony here in the American South, and white people are the colonizers and black people are still just colonized. And we've just kind of accepted that as the everyday America. But in Afghanistan, it actually officially imploded. So there's this notion that you can just kind of drop ballot boxes and a constitution on a people, and then all of a sudden it's going to be a constitutional democracy. You can just kind of give everyone the vote, and then the kind of like air bomb ballot boxes, and then you have a nation, a people. And that's just not true. And it takes more than just like a newspaper on all of these formal binding mechanisms. You need more than the same media. It was like, well, you need the same media and the same culture. No, it's more than just having the same media and the same culture. You need particular kinds of media and particular kinds of culture. So you need universal property rights so it's not the case that some people can have property and some people can't. Because if you don't have property, that means you don't have property over your own body, which means you can't be responsible for what you say or do. It could be the responsibility of your master, which means democratic self-governance is impossible. So you need property rights, at least over your own body, so that your words and deeds can be known as yours, right? And so any sort of understanding of property rights that doesn't give people property over their own words and deeds means that no matter how many ballot boxes you drop, you're not going to have a constitutional democracy. You can't have self-government. It would be like dropping ballot boxes on, like I said, either the American South, like before slavery or after slavery. It doesn't really matter insofar as the expression of the vote is going to be an expression of the master's will, not really emancipated. Right, so you need universal property rights if you're going to have a constitutional democracy. You need a scheme of moral accountability, which means you're accountable for what you do on purpose. Not necessarily everything you do, but everything you do on purpose. Because if you can't be accountable for everything you do and say on purpose, like I said, you can't. There's a problem with self-governance. You can't be accountable for what you say in meetings. You can't be accountable for actually the expressions that you purposefully express. And just in general, you can think about the difference between someone who backs into you as they're driving because they sneezed and then they hit the gas and that backs into you, or someone who backs in, or someone who rear ends you because they were changing the radio station as they were on the phone texting and were making all of these poor choices, right? So the second person we say is more capable, more culpable for their actions insofar as they did their actions on purpose. This isn't the case that they happen to hit your back tire because they sneezed and it was external things that are yours, like I said, your body, and what you do on purpose. Not necessarily everything you do, but what you do on purpose in order for self-governance. So if you have schemes that don't hold people accountable for what they do on purpose, then you're not going to have a constitutional democracy. Also, equality within the household. If you have schemes of strict hierarchy within the household, that means you're not going to be able to have a constitutional democracy, because what will be expressed from the votes of the other members of the household will be like a household vote that's determined by a hierarchy. Right? So you need free households if you're going to have a free people. And free households means equality in making like just household decisions and household decisions that are restricted to the household. For example, if you can say, well, we can organize our household any way you want. That's not a problem for freedom. It actually is. If you're saying that, for example, you can't work outside. If the guy is telling the woman she can't work outside of the house, that's not just about how she's organizing her household. That's about her ability to leave and exercise freedom outside of the household, including political freedom. You can't have a constitutional democracy when women aren't allowed even outside to vote. Or they're, expected to vote the way of their husband. Either way is going to be a problem, right? And it screws it up for all of the people who aren't in that kind of household because they look like they could be in that kind of household. It's impossible to tell the difference. If you're hiring, I ask my students this, and they get nonplussed until they think through it and are horrified by the truth of what I'm saying. So I'm going to tell you something. If you look like someone who's in one of these repressive marriages, you still get punished as if you are in a repressive marriage. You still get punished by society as if you are. For example, if I'm a hiring manager and I have to hire between two people, one person who is in a repressive marriage and the other person who looks like they're in a repressive marriage, and I know that whomever I hire, I'm going to put $100,000 into training them, I don't want to hire someone who is going to, at any point in time, be told by their husband, well, you got to stay home now for the good of the family, right? So not only does the person in the repressive marriage not get the job, the person who looks like they're in the repressive marriage doesn't get the job, because I have a fiduciary responsibility to my shareholders to, not squander their investment capital. And so I'll hire the person who doesn't look like they're in an oppressive marriage, because I don't want to have to deal with someone who says, well, talked it over with my husband and he says I have to quit this job after I've spent $100,000 in training them for this job, right? So the presence of these repressive families not only screws up the civil opportunities, non-family civil opportunities for the people in the repressive household, it also screws up the civil opportunities for the people who look like them in that repressive household. Right? The argument gets a little bit more complicated, but not much. So if you're paying attention, or you need to go back and pay attention, then you should get it. All right. So what else? So you need universal property rights. You need free households. You need a civil society that actually it can be governed under civil law, right? Which is one of the problems with the United States. Achievement of economic opportunity. You need the achievement of economic opportunity and somewhat equal opportunity under the law. And then on top of that, we can start talking about the political institutions of freedom. Without those social factors, without those non-political, those social factors, property rights, moral accountability, household freedom, and equal economic opportunity under the law, under a civil law, then just adding ballot boxes doesn't do it, right? So those factors weren't present in Afghanistan or in the American South, and so adding the vote was just a disaster. You can't just do it with guns and money. You can't just have a nation run on guns and money. And this is a problem talking to a lot of rich people and Americans in general. They think everything can be solved with guns and money, and not through conforming meaning-making institutions to uphold, political freedom. We have a nation that's pretty much held together by money and nuclear subs. So there's a way in which, but it's made us decadent. It's made us decadent. We're not really a nation. Like I said, South is pretty much a colonial state. And black people are an internal colony within a functional state. But the nation has enough money and guns to make it an orderly colonial state. So black people are appropriately repressed. We built a we built a prison industry to keep it that way. right? So outside of the institutions of political freedom, you need social factors that conform, free social factors that conform to and uphold political freedom. And if you're not willing to do the hard work of conforming those social factors, then that's a problem. And moral accountability is going to extend to churches. So pretty much you're going to have to conform religions to uphold constitutional democracy. And for those who say, oh no, you don't, look at the United States. We have religious freedom and we still have a constitutional democracy. Well, yes and no, right? So religious freedom also gave you this. This church had to go. Right? So you can't say, well, we worship white supremacy in this church because it's part of our religious values. No, we bar that. That's a problem. So religious freedom, and we bar incest and necrophilia, and we bar all sorts of cultish practices. We bar all sorts of religious practices that get in the way of upholding political democracy. The only reason we let, Christianity and even Catholicism in here is because, Jesus is pretty clear about rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's. If that wasn't in the case, and if you couldn't ground the supremacy of the political system in your religion, then your religion's a threat to that political system. And that's going to be a problem, right? So you need to privatize households and render them equal and free. And you need to privatize religions and render them equal and free to allow for a civil society that can be free. And then that free civil society then upholds political freedom. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're not serious about the nation building process. I'm trying to figure out, we weren't really willing to we had to change how white Southerners worship God, and we needed to change how white Southerners think of their property, and we needed to change of how white Southerners think of civil society. And we weren't willing to do that social work. So instead of doing that, we just threw ballot boxes, and that's how Reconstruction failed. And then we even pulled out the guns, and it's just a joke. Yeah. You have the guns there to give you cover while you do the social work. And the social work isn't just school. Social work is actually reforming institutions like religious, property, and civil institutions. And if you're not doing that work, then the guns aren't that important. And so I'm going to talk a few drawbacks of this variety of colonialism and nation building in a second. But I do want to say that taking the social factors that uphold a certain variety or a political vision is important. You have to take the social factors, the non-political social factors, seriously. I think I did a video on this before, calling for the total war. I can call it the comprehensive campaign. If you don't like the total war, like the total political war includes all of these social factors, you can call it the comprehensive campaign. You need a comprehensive campaign if you're going to build a nation. And it can't just be schools and guns. You need to conform their view of religion, and you need to conform their view of the family, and you need to conform their view of civil society. Because parochialism in any of those spheres is going to undercut the political supremacy you need and equality, the equality you need for a democratic government and the political supremacy you need for a constitutional democracy. All right. But if you do conform the family, understand free families, if you do conform civil societies and equal opportunity in civil affairs, and if you do conform property rights so that people are universally accountable, universally recognized as having property, at least in their own body, that's theirs, then you have the possibility of upholding political freedom. We still need all of these other spheres of right, political rights, like media and education, because you can't really vote if you don't really know anything about the candidates. So you need media and education and all of these other political rights. But these social factors need to be conformed in order to uphold political vision. And the failure to take the social factors seriously will just lead to a formal and hollow political vision, which I think characterizes Afghanistan for the last 15 years. Formal and hollow. All right, and we kind of took this seriously with respect to Japan, because at the end of World War II, we were like, all right, God Emperor, we're going to need you to make a public declaration that you are not, you are not a God, you are just a person. because you can't have a constitutional democracy on one person and a god in the body of the emperor on the other. So we're going to need you to make a public declaration about, like, you're not a god. All right. So we said that after World War II, and the Japanese were like, yeah, because, you know, we had bombs then. And so we kind of imposed the external conditions for an internal constitutional republic. All right. So you're going to have a problem. So anytime you have nation building, you're going to have a problem because it's going to be, you need to be pretty muscular in your social program, and you can't just use it to exploit and extract resources from the community. The goal is and this is what nonprofits should do. The goal is to work yourself out of a job, not to make profit off of their vulnerability. And so you got to get rid of the incentives that, like, and this is the same with nonprofit culture. You got to get rid of the incentives that allow you to profit from the vulnerability of the people you're helping. And that's good. All right. So what's going to be the problem? What's going to be the post-colonial problem? And Winfield talks about this where he talks about the problem in 89 through 87, 88. He talks about the problems a little bit after that. And it's going to be pretty much coming down to, you're going to have these vestiges of pre-modern parochial hierarchies that are going to be kind of diffused throughout society, not secluded on reservations, but like actually diffused throughout societies. You've dropped ballot boxes, but you still haven't gotten rid of like how the vestiges of how like asymmetrical families in civil society and unequal opportunity in civil society, and what was the third thing? Oh, dicey property rights are kind of still metastasized through the society. So, which means the political outcomes aren't going to be representative of a free people. They're going to be representative of a socially determined people, determined by their pre-traditional or pre-modern conventions, right? So, and then on the other side of that, if you're talking about a post-colonial regime, you have to, and this is important, this is especially important for the American South, you have to account for how all of the pre-modern conventions were about like abolishing and like ravaging the civil capacities of the people you're trying to emancipate, right? So you had slavery, which was all about abolishing the black family, all about abolishing black civil participation, and all about abolishing property, black like sense of property, right? So black people weren't in charge of their own bodies. They weren't given an education for civil society, including like the bureaucratic. They weren't taught how to read. They were forbidden, not just weren't taught, were forbidden learning how to read. And so like, there's a bureaucratic competence you need in civil society, and just, participate in commerce goods. And then also, lastly, our family was pretty much destroyed and decimated. So in all three of those social factors, like you need to rebuild them if we're going to be a self-determining people. We need to enable like healthy families that are equal. We need to enable property rights, and we need to enable like equal opportunity and civil participation. Then on top of that, we'll have political freedom. But in order to do that, we're going to have to like form all of those institutions through like political power and supremacy through the guns. So it gets a little tricky. So the first problem is in a post-colonial society, you still have pre-colonial vestiges and traditional vestiges of hierarchy kind of dispersed throughout society, diffused throughout society. The second problem is that in order to make this a colonial society to begin with, now that we're post-colonial, and to make a colonial society, you had to wipe out families, property rights, and civil participation. So you're dealing with a broken people. Right? You're dealing with a broken people who have been decimated, culturally decimated. And so you have to rebuild that, which is a whole thing. And then lastly, now you rebuild that in a context where they're competitive with more developed modern societies, which leaves them ripe for exploitation. Right? So, traditional vestiges, problem. Because insofar those non-modern vestiges are parochial authorities are going to be a problem that for political governance. 2, the ravages of colonialism, which destroyed any semblance of family property rights and civil society and reformed them in the colonial image. And 3, now that post-colonial society is in competition with more developed modern society. The wolves are circling, or the buzzards are circling. And that's, I think that was the case with Afghanistan and the American South. That was black communities. They're like, all right, black people, now compete with Amazon. Go compete with Jeff Bezos. All right. So come on, hustle harder. You can compete with Jeff Bezos. And so if you're serious about nation building, you have to be serious about establishing property rights, establishing free families, and establishing, a sphere of moral accountability, which means a church that upholds constitutionality and the equality of citizens and equal participation in civil society. Then we could start talking about airdropping ballot boxes and securing political rights. So political freedom depends on non-political but social factors. We don't take the social factors seriously. We think political freedom depends on the presence of ballots or even the uniformity. We think that if everyone's on the same page, they're a nation. They can be a constitutional democracy. No, everybody can be on the same page, but it can be a really bad page, shot through with like oppressive internal dynamics within the family, oppressive civil societies, and an inequality and property rights, or particularization or privileging of certain property rights over other people, as people are conceived of as property. All right. I hope this has been helpful. Remember, political freedom requires social factors. We don't take the social factors seriously. We won't get the political project you want. And those social factors include church, property, civil society, moral accountability. All of those things have to be conformed in order to uphold political freedom. Right? If you want more about this, check out Richard Dean Winfield's Modernity, Religion, and the War on Terror, especially pages 87 and 88. And 87 and 88. And just that chapter in general. Yeah, that chapter in general. Yeah, he actually tries to say Turkey almost got this right, but kind of, it's tricky. Turkey almost got this right. But you have to be very invasive. You have to be very invasive in conforming society if you want to set up the antecedents, the things that go before actually a political democracy, a constitutional democracy. Thank you very much, and I will see you Friday. Oh, no, Thursday. We do Thursday shows. We do Thursday shows now because I have class on Friday. Take care. Bye.